Hello and welcome to the Flux Dev Meeting, July 30th.
Everyone. Good morning, Lee. How early is it?
It's 6 a.m. here, so
Sorry, man. Yeah. Okay. Um, some news about what have we achieved since last week. We are moving forward with the refactoring of how we read, generate, and reference secrets and config maps around all the Flux controllers, the CLI, and so on. We have an awesome contributor that is helping us with this effort. Cappy Zawa, that is GitHub IDs. Yes, and Lee, we started from that discussion, like, oh, we want some I think it was MTLS in notification controller, and we realized that we handle how we read secrets differently everywhere. So it's mostly 80% the same stuff with 20% which is different. So now we are dealing with supporting all the edge cases, making sure we don't break changes in controllers. A discovery from this week was that we handled certificate authority very different. For example, in source controller, we append the custom CA to the system CA, what we have in Alpine, while in notification controller, we don't append it. We isolate every call to that particular CA. So anyway, we are not going to normalize this right now and just try to get the refactoring ready by Flux 2.7. I'm not sure. I mean, it's impossible for us to undo this appending stuff because Git repo, everything in source controller is GA v1. But in notification controller, the provider API is Gita, is not v1. So you can make the decision, let's normalize everything, append the CA to the system one, in all controllers the same, so we don't have a divergency. And later on, we could actually introduce a feature gate in all controllers where people, if they don't want to trust the system CAs at all, the cluster admin, that's a cluster admin responsibility. He will set the feature flag. I don't know, custom CA trust only or whatever. We need to figure out naming for it. Then the cluster admin can actually switch all controllers to only trust the custom sets that they are providing if they do so. Another thing related to this discussion is an RFC that I think Paulo created a long time ago, where the concern was there around custom CAs and multi-tenancy. Basically, now as a tenant, you can create a Flux object, your, I don't know, OCI repo in your own namespace. You are allowed to do that. And you can connect it to a server with a custom CA, and you have to give it a custom CA. Now, the concern was, what if it connects to, I don't know, something that's not proper TLS connection, or the algorithm of the TLS connection is deprecated or stuff like that. How can a cluster admin enforce these to tenants? And right now you have this, we can do this with Kubernetes policies where we a tenant can enforce at admission control, you are only allowed to connect to these sources. But it's one thing to say you are allowed to connect to this HTTPS URL. Another thing is to say the TLS connection for this source has to be 1.3, for example, right? It's not something you can do with an admission policy, just looking at the URL. So if in the future we are going to add these feature gates for custom CAs, maybe we should think about adding also some kind of restrictions for the TLS version that the admin can say only 1.3. You're not allowed to connect to 1.2 or whatever, right? Because that's only Flux knows exactly, and only in Flux in when it constructs the client and it does the TLS handshake, only then we can enforce some kind of I don't know, minimum supported version or stuff like that. Right now, for example, and we also have this issue with Git, where we still support unsafe what was it, Mateus? I think you created an issue around this. It was the SSH key, right? Let me find it.
Oh, the deprecation in Flux 2?
Yes, so this is in the same space as I want to block TLS 1.2. With SSH, for example, we still allow the use of SHA-1
As a host key.
for the
No.
host keys. For the SSH authentication,
For the SSH.
right? For the private key. And
Yeah.
this is also something that you can't protect yourself as a cluster admin with an admission policy, right? An admission policy can only look at the URL. Oh, it's a SSH URL, so you can allow it or not. But if you allow SSH and then you want to say, I want to allow SSH, but only, I don't know, SHA-2 or whatever other algorithm, a subset of the algorithms that we support right now, that's impossible to do, right? So the discussion is, are we going to take this decision for users on our own? Like remove support for SSH1, remove support for, unsecure TLS versions, or we allow the cluster admins through future gates, future flags, controller flags, whatever, to restrict the algorithms to the ones that they want. It's a discussion to have at some point. Right now, for SSH, we allow all the keys. For TLS, we use the default TLS client. And while we were doing this work with certificates, with secrets and so on, we discovered that Golang upstream has changed the minimum TLS version, and we just do new client. So whatever, if Go crypto upstream tomorrow decides to drop some TLS versions from there, the moment we release Flux, we always update Go crypto and everything, all the packages, we are inheriting whatever Golang in upstream is doing, which can, of course, break people's clusters. And we are not going to be aware unless someone opens a pull request after an issue after the upgrade. Oh, I don't know, container registry is on TLS 1.2 and now it doesn't work. what will happen on Flux 2.7, by the way, because we upgraded the Go Crypto packages and yeah, TLS 1.2 was removed.
I would normally be inclined into like implementing this kind of thing in a non-breaking way with allowing people to toggle it off. But since it's security and the thing you just said can happen, right? Like this can happen and go. And
Oh, but
security
this is the
like
default in Go. We can we can say new client. These are the things that I'm supporting. They just removed it from the default supported list. Is didn't removed it from Go Crypto, right? So the thing is, should we use the defaults everywhere? And if I don't know, the Go SSH package decides to remove SHA-1 from the default list. They already did it and we added back because we were breaking people's clusters. So that already happened. With TLS, we'll discover after we release Flux 2.7 how many people will be affected by the fact that we have now switched to the default client, and we don't set a minimum TLS version anymore, so it's inherited from Go Crypto, which is 1.3.
So this is something that we need to deal with now.
I mean, in source controller, I added 1.3 long time ago as in the constructor, but was not the same stuff in notification controller. Notification controller was using the default line. Now that we are normalizing this, we are using the default client everywhere, which means it will not change the behavior of source controller, because in source controller already had hard-coded 1.3 last year. Now we switched to the default, it's still 1.3. But in notification controller, it wasn't hard-coded to the 1.3. So at some point we supported 1.2, and now in 2.7, when we release it, we are going to basically drop support for TLS 1.2 from everything Flux. I don't know. I consider it being an overlook from our part. I should have, when I changed it in source control, I should have went everywhere and changed it, and I didn't. So maybe we should just mention it in the changelog and see if anyone screams. I mean, TLS 1.2 is really bad. No one should be using that. And if they do, and we get a lot of people and they say we are blocked, we can't move to 1.3, we can then think doing this kind of feature flag. Anyway, what's your opinion on this, Lee, Mateus, everyone?
I just like remember what it was like to be in a, a situation where a company had been bankrupted and there were servers that had not been touched for years, and we needed to upgrade from SSL v3 to TLS for our payment provider. And that involved updating Red Hat Enterprise Linux on hundreds of servers, and rebuilding a bunch of Python apps. It's like when,
It can be painful.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm thinking about, I guess, like a platform team being stuck on somebody's old installation of GitLab or something. I don't know. I mean, it's like the TLS libraries have supported 1.3 for a reasonably long time now.
Yeah.
I mean, if Go is changing the default, that's a pretty good indicator that somebody on the Go team has done some statistics.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
hard to
why.
add like a little string thing for the feature gate, and that could maybe be a place for us to allow people to force an, a non-default behavior in the future as well, right? Like if the feature gate is not supplied, then we can just follow the defaults of whatever. And then in, you know, if there's a 1.4 at some point for TLS, or they want to supply a different SSH key algo list for some new post-quantum cryptography curve, or some lattice-based, cryptography, then that could be a way for Flux to provide some optionality to the platform engineer. Say, hey, we only support post-quantum algorithms on this cluster. I could see that making sense as a controller feature gate or a controller configuration flag, in the same way that it feels similar to the CA append behavior, like whether or not you should trust the system CA. These
Yep.
are very infrastructure levers, kind of, they feel like the files that you would change on a system with Puppet that don't relate to the app at all, but have consequences for the app's transport capabilities. So it feels similar in that way. Because we do everything in Go, there's not some magical knob or file that the platform person can turn in the container image, you know. They can't, like, with the system CA, they can like overmount it, and then
Yeah.
there's like nothing to append to. So there's like a way to turn that off, but
Oh, right. But
with regard to, yeah, with regard to the SSH transport and TLS configs, that's all Go. So there's nothing in the container file system that somebody can tweak to get it to behave differently.
if you, that's interesting. So let's say you null the CA certs on Alpine. Will the controller be able to connect to Kubernetes? It will, right? Because the
Yeah, it's typically
CA
not
is
a trusted
mounted,
CA.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, the CA for the Kubernetes client is mounted into
In
the
Kubernetes secret, right?
pod. Yeah, it's not a Kubernetes secret, but like the kubelet puts it in there. Yeah,
Yeah. Like the
like
the
the
path
client
where you have the
configuration.
token,
var run
where you have,
secrets. Yeah,
yeah, variant secret. So it's there. Okay,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, okay. So that's that's a good idea. Okay. So they can actually do it today if they, because we are going to append to an empty list of CAs. if someone really needs it, and before we have this feature flag for CAs.
Yeah, you would basically break Flux's ability to speak to anything on the internet, which is fine. And any internal CA or any internal certificates on your intranet that were signed by public CAs or Let's Encrypt or whatever. And I think that that would be the expected behavior if you were overmounting like Alpine Linux CA or a distroless CA or something.
Yeah, so the
Pretty
use case
simple
for
controller patch.
for the use case for this is you run air-gapped. You
Yes.
have your own container registry
Hmm.
with your own cert. You self-sign, right? Then it doesn't make sense for OCI repo and that's the only source you have, only OCI repos in Flux. All of them have a cert secret TLS cert reference where you have your CA there. Maybe you have your client and your client private key. Maybe you have MTLS. Why would you allow someone to create an OCI repo for GitHub? Right? Of course, you can. This type of thing is definitely something which is in the realm of the Kubernetes validation admission with Cell, where you can say, we also have this example in blog posts where you can say, I create this policy that watches for all the Flux OCI repos, and you give it an allow list of URLs where you can, in the allow list, it will only be your, private endpoint for the registry, and you'll deny Git repo, you'll deny GitHub Container Registry or anything else outside. But
Yeah.
if you don't have this policy in place, and if you you override the Alpine certs, you'll automatically deny everything. Right?
Yeah.
Because
I think
it's
typically
a
like
different way.
people would also be rewriting like other people's domains like to their registry in this scenario. Like in a Red Hat cluster, you can control the container or the cryo config to be like, oh, these GitHub images actually come from our private registry, or you know, these replicated images or chain guard images come from here instead of here. So you're not talking to the public internet there. You're going to be trusting some internal CA. And then it's like nothing stops somebody from managing like the public internet CAs, this way, and they're just not trusting it from the image. They're getting it from something else.
Wait, but if you don't change the URL, let's say the URL in your OCI repository is GitHub Container Registry, ghcr.io, podinfo. And you have this kind of proxy, I'm guessing in Red Hat or whatever, which is, oh, this is not GCR, this is in fact registry.local or whatever.
Yes.
This will never work with Flux. Because what Flux does, Flux parses the URL, takes the host name for the URL, and sets
you're correct.
in the TLS client
Mm-hmm.
the host name to equal what's in the URL. Now, if all of the sudden you give it a client TLS cert, is fine. It will load your custom TLS cert, but it will
Interesting.
not allow you to connect to some thing which is not under that particular domain. So if your proxy does redirect, it will not work because Flux will say untrusted endpoint. It should be gacr.io, and it's in fact whatever.local, right? So you need to go into your OCI repos and change the URL
Yeah.
for this to work. You are saying that Cryo does this transparent, and you don't have to change your. You will think you pull from Docker.io, what in fact you are
Yeah.
pulling from something.local.
Containerd has it as well. You can even write like overwrite like ports and protocols as well.
Yeah, we lack this feature in Flux, and it was for security reasons, because we say this is man in the middle. If you told me to connect to this URL and all of a sudden I'm redirected to this URL, I'm not going to trust the CERT because the host name is a mismatch in the host name.
Because if the HTTP client is following the redirect, it's still gonna use the same TLS config, right? So
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe we need another feature pack for this stuff. Allow mirrors or whatever.
yeah, some sort of mirror config. It's hard to imagine all of the things that you would need to add to APIs in order to support that kind of feature. That is definitely RFC material. I'm sorry that I brought it up.
Yeah, it's
Um,
but I think this is a topic that we need to address sometime in the future.
okay. I'm just gonna take a
if-
note on
The real
it.
world use case, right? There's the Dragonfly registry in CNCF that you can do exactly what you just described with. And before that,
Oh
there was
yeah,
the Uber Kraken, right? Yeah.
JFrog does it. There are a bunch of products out there which give you this cache through thing for images, right? So what Flux users are doing today, if, for example, ACR has this feature as well. So Azure users, what they are doing in the Flux OCI repo, they don't write docker.io, they write ACR whatever /docker.io / the image, and it works. But you need to put the name of the actual endpoint of the thing that does the mirroring into Flux and not only the last part, right? It would be okay if Containerd and Cryo, they are all doing this automatically without you having to tell it the name of the mirror as well. Maybe we should have some kind of configuration around this also. So Kingdom, if you are using this kind of mirroring to make it work with Flux, you need to add the actual host of the mirror
We're probably
in
just
those
gonna use ECR at this point, but we're trying to bring large images into the cluster quicker, and we've done all the optimization things to tear down our nodes as fast as possible when the workloads go away. So, and we're using EKS auto mode, so we can't pre-populate any images.
Yeah.
So
Because the nodes are not there. I know. Yeah. Okay, we can move to other topics.
Mateus just posted a issue that Deepti created on Flux package
last night.
for Azure workload identity with private clouds. I haven't read this. It's only from 13 hours ago.
Yeah, it was last night. So uh so the issue is that in a few places of the code we need to select different endpoints and things for different Azure clouds. And for example, the best way to do this is in OCI integrations, where we can extract the cloud from the URL. We don't need an additional input. We can detect the cloud and the associated properties, just looking at the URL. For kubeconfig, I initially didn't support the three public clouds, which is public, China, and US Gov. But then DeepT requested support for it, and at the time we agreed on using this Azure Authority Host environment variable. This environment variable is like injected automatically by the AKS admission webhook when there's workload identity configured. So like right now, if you want to use kubeconfig, this environment variable is going to be used regardless if it's controller level or object level. And so the issue DeepT opened last night was to introduce support for yet more things. And the suggestion is based on environment variables as well. And I am a bit uncomfortable with that because before any discussions around Azure started, we decided to do environment variables only supported for controller level workload entity. And an example of this is the AWS provider. The AWS provider, when you're creating a controller token, so controller level, it's allowed to look at the AWS_region environment variable, which is also populated automatically by EKS when there's authentication configured for the pod. So we decided to not use this environment variable for object level. And yeah, so this is the issue now. Like, I don't know what to do exactly. Like maybe maybe just allow it for Azure. I don't know. Like ideally for object level, I would like object level fields, not environment variables. But at the same time, adding a bunch of fields only for Azure doesn't sound good to me.
Are these injected materials automatically, like the one that we rely on?
So yeah, so the first one we introduced for Azure is one that is injected automatically. So that's why I was kind of okay with it, because it's like it's not only well known but also automatically injected. That's one of the things that made me
Probably it's
convinced.
hard coded in the AKS SDKs.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What about
That
these others? Other.
So these others, there's like she's like proposing introducing new unknown like environment variables, like so
Unknown to you or unknown to Azure? Or unknown
to
to what?
like new. There's no, she's not proposing any well-known SDK available environment variables or Azure or anything. Like just oh, how can we do this? Maybe environment variables. So she's not proposing specific names that are present in SDKs and everything. Basically that.
How is wait. Let's
Hmm.
I think we need to investigate more on this. So for these private clouds, how are the other Azure things dealing with this?
Good question.
This is if we are going to implement this, we need to follow a standard, right?
Right.
not invent our own envars and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
how
Exactly.
are other services? Because when you run Azure on your own data center, I did this like 20 years ago. It was crazy. Anyway, so
Mhm.
if you do this kind of stuff, you definitely run some Azure agents that are, I don't know, for example, syncing your database, your Microsoft SQL database on-prem with some standby in Azure. You are replicating files from your local storage in your data center to Azure blobs. You are doing all sorts of things. I mean, that's why you are installing it to do hybrid cloud, right? So there are existing solutions made by Microsoft that you run in this Azure distribution, and they need to connect to Azure through Entra ID, through all the stuff, right? So,
Mhm.
and it's all based on ADC, right? So what if we are going to do this, we should follow the standard. How is this configuration? Is this configuration mounted somehow? Do they have some kind of admission webhook that does it, inject some standard things to tell all that, right? So yeah, let's talk with Dipti maybe next week.
Yeah,
Maybe
she
she can
usually
join.
joins on Thursday because of the time.
Yeah, yeah. So let's not take a decision right now. I'm not for
Yeah, yeah.
inventing our own envars. I'm for figuring out how is this actually working for other services. Does it make sense for
Yeah,
Flux?
definitely.
Are
I mean,
there standard things? And if they are, we should use them.
yeah, definitely.
Uh,
But like, I think even if let's say we find standards and we follow them, I am thinking that that will only make sense, still only makes sense for controller level, right? Because normally workload entity is single tenant. It's just for the pod at hand, right? It's for the application at hand. So any standards we find out there, I think they will still only mostly make sense for controller level. So the big problem at hand here is that what do we do with object level? I said in the thread, I'm fine introducing environment variables for controller level. As long as it's only for controller level and they're not supported for object level, because that's what we decided before. But I can also like accept suggestions on rethinking what I accept because I don't know like that. I have no idea what to do here. Like introduce a bunch of fields in the APIs just for Azure sounds so wrong.
The
yeah,
assumption
not in the APIs.
here, if you make this switchable via an environment variable, is that if you ever need to get objects to operate in both clouds in one cluster, like
Yeah, like
then the only escape hatch that you have is to shard your Flux installation
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
with labels, um, which is a very reasonable kind of configuration that not a lot of users go down the path of because it involves
Yeah.
making things with labels show up here versus here, oftentimes controlling who gets to create things with certain labels or auto labeling things and um in what
Mm.
namespaces or whatever.
Yeah, I like that idea. That makes sense to me. Like before introducing this environment variable for Azure for kubeconfig, object level workload identity in Flux could be used seamlessly for any integrations, any APIs in any clusters. Like in one cluster, you could target whatever cloud, whatever integration you had at the object level. Now because of like this is a feature, like you cannot use Azure kubeconfig for multiple clouds, for example, in a cluster, right? Because it's an environment variable. And it's this environment variable is already the first and thank God not yet released feature that breaks this pattern. But I guess we should probably take the stance you just said. Like we should say, hey, for things that we cannot introduce in the API as fields, that we are like that our only acceptable solution is through the environment, like environment variables. For those features, we only support multi-tenancy by sharding,
Oh, I
right?
think it's very, very acceptable to have an instance of customized controller and Helm controller for dedicated for a particular cloud. If you are doing this kind of thing, you should shard anyway, because the latency will be so high, like a single controller talking with different clouds on different network paths, on different whatever. It will bring chaos to a single controller, just from that perspective of, you know, what SLAs you can ensure on a controller that connects to 5 different clouds? Zero. You need to dedicate instances just to isolate, the connectivity and all those issues like latency. But the sharding, of course, is not ideal because you then need something like a third-party admission controller that knows how to do mutations and auto labeling. What Lee was saying. So I have a very high hope that soon this crazy dependency will go away. Like it went away with validation admission that's now built into Kubernetes. The cap has been approved for mutation. And I'm not sure if now is in alpha or the release that comes now in August, mutation is alpha. But once this is GA, it will be so easy to do sharding and auto labeling from a tenancy perspective, multi-tenancy perspective, once this is built in, right? As with
So you're
validation,
saying
how
it's gonna
we
be easier than
anything.
Flux instance.
I mean, no, it will be very easy to assign which things should be reconciled by which shard. Now it's easy with the Flux instance to say I want 5 shards. But the problem right now is you need to manually assign, oh, this namespace should target this cloud, and this namespace should target this other cloud, right? You create 2 shards, but then you have to go into Git and manually label the things based on the namespace.
So they get
Once,
reconciled by the shard.
yes, you need to manually assign through the label all the things in namespaces, in particular namespaces to particular shards. And it's easy to, forget to type in a label and it gets reconciled by another shard or the main shard. Everything fails. You need to debug it and so on. Now, if the mutation admission webhook will go GA into Kubernetes, the same way we now have with the validation with GA, and we published policies. Hey, this is how you can restrict tenants to pull images from untrusted sources and so on. And it's so easy with Flux depends on to say, after clustered bootstrap, the first thing that gets applied are the policies and then everything else, right? We can do the same with mutation policies where you have, let's say, the resource set or the customization that bootstraps a tenant. in that tenant will have a policy attached to that tenant that say, oh, if a Helm release or customization goes to this tenant namespace, automatically label it with this shard, which is dedicated for that tenant, right? So then people don't have to, you just put your Flux customization in your tenant repo. When it gets deployed, it gets automatically assigned to a shard by the policy. So you as an end user, you are no longer responsible or have to remember, oh, I need to have this label here, otherwise everything will break and so on, right? You can definitely do this with fully automatically with a single configuration and have this procedure part of the tenant onboarding. You write it once, then you forget about it, it's always applied, right? And that
Nice.
will, and having this mutation policy, I think this will open the door to people being more inclined on doing sharding for hard multi-tenancy inside the cluster, instead of doing object level workload identity and all this stuff. It's so much easier to say, spin up this new shard, assign this identity, and this shard is responsible now for reconciling everything from this tenant, right? And then you don't need anything, but because Flux will automatically use the workload identity of that pod, of its own pod, right? To go to repos, to go to sources, to do kubeconfig, everything. So, and right now it's quite. I mean, we did it. I did it many times before. Doing this sharding and multi-tenancy stuff. It's challenging just because it's error prone. Because of labels and everything. But if we can solve this, I think it will be a really good alternative to the current multi-tenancy that we kind of have now with this object level stuff. And if it's attached to the controller pod and you can assign a pod to a tenant that has to connect from this management cluster to these other clusters in other clouds, as you said, you don't need any other configuration because workload identity is made for this, right? The pod already has that identity. So
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So yeah, like I mean, this is a good way, like a good stance to take in document to justify why this is not supported in object level, right? Like because object level should be fields. We're not going to introduce fields for this. Then what we do is, okay, we allow object level because somebody may still want to use object level with this, right? That's exactly the problem. Like DeepT is asking for these features to work with object level. And the only way I see out is allowing environment variables to be used for object level, like we allowed in the first environment variable we introduced for Azure. So basically we're saying, yeah, whenever this is the only way, right? Because for example, Amazon doesn't need this AWS region environment variable does not like object level does not need that. It works without it. Like you can extract the region from ARNs, URLs, etc. So whenever this is the only alternative, like in Azure, right? We say, okay, this environment variable will work with controller level and object level, but the only way to target multiple Azure things is to shard Flux.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, I think is very reasonable.
Yeah, I can
Especially
live with
now
that.
that sharding is easy. Now we made it really easy. You just say, oh, I want these shards and it automatically happens. But if we also solve the UX part on the end user, where labeling happens automatically, then it will be
Mhm.
can document it and it's easy to use.
Yeah.
And I think it's also
but I will make it my personal duty to like review every use case we introduce in a way that we only support an environment variable if it's the only way. Like if I can find a good alternative where I don't have to use an environment variable and it fits well with object level without an environment variable or things that retrieve from the environment, I'll prefer that. And yeah, I'll only allow environment stuff for control level when it's the last alternative.
Mateus, sorry, I've just read through some of the context here, and I'm on Deepti's issue specifically, and she brought up these two different code paths. It looks to me like in both of these cases, there's sort of a heuristic being applied. One is a switch statement on a bunch of hosts, and then the other is a regex match on a bunch of hosts.
Yes.
Um, can we, if this environment variable could be a slice, like parsed as a slice of host names, does that make it so that people can add their own custom host names and then have it still work with
You
like
mean the existing
US?
one, like Azure Authority Host, for example?
No. I don't know how that one works. That
Okay,
seems
so
single
so you mean
override.
the other use cases from the issue, right? The one
Yes.
deep thief
The other
described.
use cases are like, yeah, we have a regex that's hard coded that matches multiple hosts. And then like we have you know, like another like a switch statement that's like matching multiple hosts. So like
Yes. So your suggestion is make the environment variable a slice
or
to
I guess in case one, it almost looks like it would be a map. Is that correct? Like if the host is something, then it goes here versus here.
yes, a map makes more sense.
Feels very unfortunate, but yeah, like if this is the kind of I'm guessing the whoever owns the cluster here is operating with a private cloud where they get to control domain names and certificates and all that. So like
Yeah.
the case here is if we are talking to an artifact registry and like the URL is something, then we want to talk to some Azure Resource Manager endpoint that is controlled by the cluster or cloud operator. So is that correct?
I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah. Um, it seems like these environment variables that would be being proposed that they're not just like a single string.
Yeah, they're like
They're
they're
lists, apps.
yeah, they're more complex. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like there's something, can this use case be solved by a single environment variable and not just an, or does it have to be two? Because there's two different use cases here. So I just have questions there, but I think
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
understand
mean,
the
we
concern.
definitely need to like look also what Stefan said about looking at well, like how is this kind of thing currently being solved as well. So yeah, we this
Yeah.
needs investigation, like the exact way we're gonna implement this with environment variables or not, or how. Like
Yeah.
I need more time to investigate this. But are you are you thinking about this because you think that, let's say, if if we need multiple environment variables or an environment variable that has a JSON serialized like
Yeah.
a map or something horrible like that, would that massively change our stance here of what we like discuss here about no, we're okay with, environment variables when it's the only solution and we frame it as sharding, like would you change that stance
I
depending
don't
on?
think that it significantly changes the stance. If anything, it kind of strengthens the only thing is just like if you provide fields, then maybe you can take in simpler values, right? Because this controller behavior is trying to make assumptions, right? And like giving the end user control on the OCI repo or whatever,
Right,
to say, no, this is exactly what I want to happen instead of relying on some heuristic or matching behavior.
right, that makes sense.
A little bit
But
less frustrating, but then it requires, then you get into questions of like, are we allowing the platform engineer who installs Flux to control this, or are we giving it to the end user? And do they, like, at least you can write policies around it, but then like, is this, yeah, I don't know. I think I understand what you're thinking, but this,
yeah, I mean, like the problem. I mean, sure, that makes I totally understand what you're saying about instead of doing heuristics, we could like give exact control of the inputs that are needed and things like that.
Mhm.
But anything like that would land on the bucket of we're not gonna add this to the APIs, right?
Yeah,
Because like for everything else, we're able to support this uniformly without fields that work only for some clouds and others not. Like it's parity everywhere. So these like these weird Azure use cases, like it's really just for Azure. We just can't. It just doesn't make sense to add in the API, and whatever we do to solve this, yes, we can give ultimate control to users. It just won't be in the API. It will be control level, and I guess that's probably the most important takeaway for this discussion,
okay.
right?
Um, yeah, let's follow up in the main, in the contributor chat or something. Um, Adrian mentioned, hello, I just wanted to share that a PR I'm currently working on with regards to the OTel implementation on notification controller 1149. As far as I can tell, it's a draft. Still, because while exploring this, some questions cropped up in terms of conventions on how to manage this with different potential sources, how to deal with global versus local traces and exporting them. Um, and Adrian's asking to have a call or meeting going over this in detail as we're running out of time for today's meeting. In this case, it'd be great if I can get some clarity on the questions stated in the pull request. Sorry, but I need to drop. Have a nice rest of your day. Thanks for posting the detailed message, Adrian. Let's definitely prioritize talking about your hotel contributions. We can either find an ad hoc meeting for that, or at the latest, we can do it by the next dev call. So, um,
Maybe let's do it now. Next dev call will be US time, right? So we can talk,
yeah,
we can
I do
get
have another meeting
deeply.
that I need to drop for right now. 2 minutes late for, but
Yeah, sorry, I need to drop as well. So yeah, we can
Yeah,
talk
so
about
maybe in 2 weeks, Adrian, we can do the whole
Okay,
dev Flux meeting on hotel and figure out.
perfect.
So
Yeah,
not
if
next meeting, which is US time, the other one, which is EU time, like this one, and we can dedicate a whole meeting and go over your pull request.
yeah.
okay,
Okay?
sounds perfect. But if we can like follow this up in the pull request, just to get some answers, it would be great just to
Sure.
keep in the loop and yeah, and still exploring. Yeah, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, let's close it. I also have to go to another meeting.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much, everyone.
See you
Okay.
next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.